You know that moment when you're sitting at your desk on a random Tuesday afternoon and you suddenly wonder, wait, what am I actually getting paid right now? Like, your paycheck says one thing, but when you factor in commuting, getting ready for work, decompressing after work, the stuff you have to buy just to have the job in the first place, what are you really making per hour? Here's what messed me up when I actually did this calculation for myself. My job paid $30 an hour. Sounds decent, right? But when I sat down and mapped out every single hour I was giving to that job, including all the invisible time that doesn't show up on a timesheet, my real hourly rate was closer to $4. And before you think I'm exaggerating or doing some weird math trick, I'm not. I'm talking about real hours of your actual life that you're trading for money. Time you can never get back. And most people have no idea how badly they're getting ripped off in this exchange. My name is Yaji, and I've spent way too much time thinking about the relationship between time, money, and the weird game we're all playing called having a job. And today I want to show you something that might completely change how you think about work. Not in some dramatic quit your job and live in a van way, but in a way that actually helps you understand what's really happening to your time and your money. If you've ever felt exhausted despite making decent money, or if you've wondered why you never seem to have time for anything even though you're only working 40 hours a week, you're going to want to stick around for this. And if this video changes how you see your work situation, hit that subscribe button because we dive deep into this kind of stuff all the time. Here's what most people do. They get a job offer. They look at the hourly rate or the annual salary. They do some quick math in their head. And they think, okay, I can make this work. Maybe it's $25 an hour. Maybe it's $60,000 a year. The number doesn't really matter for this conversation. But that number is a lie. Not in a legal sense, like they're not going to pay you what they promised. But it's a lie in the sense that it completely misrepresents what you're actually earning for the time you're actually giving. Think about your typical work day. Let's say you work a standard 9-to-5 office job. That's 8 hours, right? So if you're making $30 an hour, you made $240 today. Seems straightforward. But did your day actually start at 9? Or did it start when your alarm went off at 6:30 so you could shower, get dressed in work-appropriate clothes, maybe grab some breakfast, and commute for 45 minutes through traffic? And did your day actually end at 5? Or did it end an hour later when you finally got home, changed out of your work clothes, and tried to decompress from the stress of the day before you could even think about doing something you actually wanted to do? Suddenly, that 8-hour workday is actually more like an 11-hour chunk of your life that was consumed by work. You weren't technically at work for all 11 hours, but you also weren't free to do whatever you wanted. You were in work mode. Your time belonged to your employer, even if they weren't directly paying you for all of it. So let's do the real math. If you worked 8 hours and got paid for 8 hours at $30, that's $240. But you actually gave 11 hours of your day to make that $240. That means your real hourly rate is about 21%, not $30. And we're just getting started. Now, let's talk about all the things you have to spend money on just to have this job in the first place, because your employer isn't paying you $30 an hour in pure profit. They're paying you $30 an hour, and then you have to spend a chunk of that just to keep showing up. You need professional clothes. Maybe it's business casual. Maybe it's full corporate attire. Maybe it's just decent clothes that you wouldn't normally wear at home. Let's say you spend $1,200 a year on work clothes. That's probably conservative if you're working in any kind of professional environment. You need to commute. Gas, car maintenance, insurance, parking fees, or if you're taking public transit, that monthly pass. Let's say that costs you $300 a month. That's $3,600 a year. You're probably buying lunch or coffee at least a few times a week, because you don't have time to pack something every single day when you're rushing out the door. That's maybe $50 a week, another $2,600 a year. You might need childcare. Or maybe you're paying someone to walk your dog in the middle of the day. Or you're paying for a gym membership because you need to de-stress from work, and you certainly don't have energy to work out at home after an 11-hour workday. And here's one nobody talks about: the convenience tax. When you're exhausted from work, you order delivery instead of cooking. You hire someone to clean your house because you don't have time or energy to do it yourself. You pay for services that you wouldn't need if you had more time and energy. Let's be conservative and say all these work-related expenses add up to about $10,000 a year. And you're working, let's say, 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week. That's 2,000 hours of paid work time. But remember, those aren't the actual hours you're giving. For every 8-hour workday, you're actually giving 11 hours when you factor in getting ready and commuting and decompressing. So you're actually giving 2,750 hours of your life per year. You earned $60,000 at your 30 per hour job. Subtract the $10,000 in work-related expenses, and you're left with $50,000. Divide that by the 2,750 hours you actually gave, and your real hourly rate is $18.18. We went from $30 an hour to $18 an hour just by being honest about the time and money this job actually costs you. But we're still not done. Let's talk about taxes. Because your employer says they're paying you $30 an hour, but you're not actually taking home $30 an hour. You're taking home maybe $22 or $23 after federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and whatever else gets pulled out of your paycheck. So now we're starting from $22 per hour of actual take-home pay for your 8 hours of work. Spread that across the 11 hours you're actually giving, and we're down to about $16 an hour before we even factor in your expenses. Subtract those work-related costs we talked about, and suddenly your real hourly rate for the time you're actually giving is somewhere around $12 to $13. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, but I still made $50,000 this year after expenses. That's not nothing. You're right, it's not nothing. But here's the question that really matters. What did you trade for that $50,000? You traded 2,750 hours of your actual life. That's 115 full days. That's almost 4 months of every single hour of every single day, gone. Not just the time you were physically at work, but the time you spent getting ready for work, traveling to work, recovering from work. And here's the part that really gets me. Those hours you traded, you can never get them back. You can make more money. You can't make more time. But it gets even more complicated when you start thinking about opportunity cost. Because those 2,750 hours you gave to your job, those are hours you didn't spend doing something else. Maybe you wanted to start a side business, but you're too exhausted after work. Maybe you wanted to learn a new skill, but you don't have the mental energy. Maybe you just wanted to spend more time with your kids, or your partner, or your friends. But by the time you get home and decompress, there's barely any time left before you have to start the whole cycle again tomorrow. And here's where it gets really dark. A lot of people spend their free time recovering from work. They're not actually free. They're in recovery mode, trying to build up enough energy and sanity to go back and do it all again. I know someone who used to work a high-stress corporate job making really good money, like 6 figures. But she told me that on Sundays, she would get this wave of dread around 4 p.m. because she knew the weekend was almost over and she had to go back to work the next day. Sunday evenings weren't even hers to enjoy because they were consumed by anxiety about Monday. So her weekend wasn't really 2 days. It was more like 1.5 days because Sunday evening was already claimed by work, even though she wasn't getting paid for it. When you start adding up all these hidden hours, all these hidden costs, all this emotional and mental taxation, you realize that the deal most of us have made with our jobs is way worse than we thought. Now, before you spiral into despair, let me be clear about something. I'm not telling you to quit your job and become a digital nomad or start a drop-shipping business or whatever the internet is selling this week. Most people need jobs. Jobs provide stability, benefits, consistent income. That's valuable. I'm not arguing against having a job. What I am arguing for is honesty. Being honest with yourself about what you're actually earning and what you're actually giving in exchange. Because here's what happens when you get honest about this. You start making different decisions. Maybe you realize that the job paying $5 more per hour, but with a 90-minute commute each way, is actually a worse deal than the job paying slightly less that's 20 minutes from your house. Maybe you realize that working from home, even if it pays a bit less, is actually worth more because you're getting back 3 hours a day that you would have spent getting ready and commuting and decompressing. Maybe you start questioning whether that promotion that comes with more responsibility and more stress is actually worth it if it's going to add another 10 hours a week to your real-time commitment. Or maybe, and this is the big one, you start thinking about how to structure your life so that more of your income comes from sources that don't require you to trade hours for dollars in this specific way. And I'm not talking about passive income guru nonsense. I'm talking about building skills that let you work more efficiently, negotiating for remote work, finding ways to reduce your work-related expenses, or even just being more intentional about which hours you're willing to trade and for what price. So what do you actually do with this information? First, calculate your real hourly rate. Seriously, sit down and do this. Map out every hour your job actually consumes, not just the hours you're getting paid for. Add up all the expenses that only exist because you have this job. Do the real math. You might be shocked. Second, use that number to evaluate your options. Is that longer commute worth it? Is that extra responsibility worth it? Is working from home worth it even if it means slightly less pay? You can't make good decisions if you're working with the wrong numbers. Third, look for ways to reduce the time tax. Can you negotiate remote work a few days a week? Can you move closer to your job? Can you find a carpool? Can you meal prep on weekends so you're not buying lunch every day? Every hour you reclaim and every dollar you stop spending on work-related expenses is increasing your real hourly rate. Fourth, think long-term. If your real hourly rate is way lower than you thought, that might be a sign that you need to invest in skills or certifications or education that could move you into a different kind of work. Not immediately, not recklessly, but strategically over time. And fifth, protect your free time like it's sacred. Because it is. If you're only getting a few hours a day that are actually yours, don't waste them scrolling or numbing out. Use them for things that actually matter to you. Time is the only resource you can't get more of. Look, I know this is heavy. It's not fun to realize that the deal you thought you had with your job isn't actually the deal you have. It's not fun to see in black and white how much time you're trading for how much money. But here's why this matters. You can't fix a problem you don't understand. You can't make better choices if you're working with bad information. And the truth is, most people are sleepwalking through this exchange. They accept the stated hourly rate without questioning it. They don't add up the hidden hours and the hidden costs. They don't realize how much of their actual life they're trading away. But you're not most people. You're watching this video, which means you're willing to ask uncomfortable questions. You're willing to look at the reality of your situation instead of just accepting what you've been told. And that awareness is the first step toward building a life that actually works for you instead of a life that just works you. You might not be able to change everything overnight. You might still need that job for now. But when you understand what's really happening, you can start making small adjustments, small optimizations, small choices that add up over time into a life that feels less like you're being exploited and more like you're in control. Because at the end of the day, your time is your life, and you deserve to know what it's actually worth.